In Oregon, 25% of the population are on food stamps. I believe I just read that 50% of the kids are on free or reduced price lunch. I mean, those numbers would have been unbelievable 25 years ago.
Bringing the people behind our food to life.
Food banking started in this country down in Arizona and really came about with a recognition that there were people who were struggling with the economy and that there is a whole lot of food going into the landfills. It started in Oregon in mid-late 70s in the Portland area, and in the early 80s what's now called Oregon Food Bank was created to set up a distribution system for the entire state. Also, in those early 80s, of course, we fell into a deep recession, but we lost a lot of our population, unlike the current situation. So, back in the early 80s, we had about 15 million pounds of federal commodities. To feed those people, we had to figure out how to get it from, the feds would drop it in one point in the state, and we had to figure out how to get it everywhere else. And then in the meantime, we were working with the food industry to keep some of that good food out of the landfill. So when the federal commodities came in, that was another catalyst for forming this distribution system. And I was part of a corps of 14 VISTA volunteers who were placed around the state to try to make this whole thing work. I happened to be placed in the Portland office, and so it was really, by hook and by crook. There weren't a lot of regulations around food handling, and fast forward nearly 30 years, and we're highly regulated, and the original concept is not, it's maybe half of what we do now. We're now buying 20% of the food that we distribute statewide. We do a lot of outreach to ensure that people are on federal food nutrition programs that they're entitled to. Because we know that despite this huge network now that numbers 950 agencies, 20 regional food banks, and we're moving, this year it'll probably be 75 million pounds of food. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of the gap between people's incomes and their nutritional needs, between the federal food nutrition benefits and their needs. And it's, it's ever more challenging now that we've had this financial crisis, and all signs are that the first thing to get cut will be those domestic programs that are feeding our kids. It's just crazy. Now, in Oregon, 25% of the population are on food stamps. I believe I just read that 50% of the kids are on free or reduced price lunch. I mean, those numbers would have been unbelievable 25 years ago. Just never imagined that all of this effort, and at least since 1990, I've always believed that it needs a public solution. It's a public problem. And if we can't expect our families to thrive, we can't expect workers to be good workers and concentrate if people's basic needs aren't being met. And it just seems to me that it's a no-brainer. Make sure everyone has access to good, healthy food, culturally appropriate, and hopefully have access to it with dignity. And you know, that's not always true in the charitable system. We do what we can to create choice, but the reality is we've all grown up with that same message in this country. You know, you work hard, you're supposed to be able to take care of yourself and your family. And when folks find themselves in a position where they can't do that, you really have to set your dignity aside to go ask for help.
Has the problem in the 30 years that you've been involved with Food Bank, has it gotten worse?
We're worse off. We're far worse off. You know, we were helping about 200,000 people a year back in the early 80s. Now the number's in the million neighborhood, million people in Oregon and Clark County, Washington, eating out of emergency food boxes. And despite this huge volunteer effort and contributions from every level of the food industry, you know, it still comes out to 20, maybe 25 days worth of food for a household. And we're beginning to see, well, with the growth in hunger among kids, you're seeing more health issues, absenteeism. Evidence suggests it's related to the dropout rate. Just because we haven't been taking care of our kids and what their brains need in order to grow and be productive citizens. And so many of our adults are living in constant crisis. More and more issues with diabetes. You know, that's another criticism of the food bank network is, well, why don't you distribute more healthy food? We distribute what's being sold. You know, we don't purposely go out and ask for snack foods or candy, or we limit what we distribute of that. And what we buy are the highest quality products we can afford. And in some ways, you know, it really hits home again of how much the original concept had changed. Because originally it was, keep good food out of the landfill. It's a temporary tide a family over in an emergency. Not you're meeting someone's nutritional needs for a year, which there's no way we can. There simply isn't the food volume there. Yeah, there are a minority of the population that probably bounce from agency to agency and lives a very subsistence life, but those are few and far between. Time and again, it's a dad that walks in and says he's been living in his car for 3 days and he finally had to come in because his kid hadn't eaten. And when the kids are with them, you know, they're reaching into the cart or reaching into the box to grab something right then. And just to think how many more people are in that situation right now.